Welcome back, everybody, to a very special Brawl in the Family podcast. I am Matthew Taranto, your host.
And I'm Chris, the other host.
That's right, we're two hosts, and today we're talking about a fantastic series called Ace Attorney. I guess we're all about the visual novels lately between this and the Zero Escape series. But Ace Attorney is also particularly relevant because it just released its 6th game in the series last month, Spirit of Justice. So, without further ado, let's get cracking on this case.
I think it's fair to say that Ace Attorney introduced visual novels to our generation.
Yeah, to a mainstream degree, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously as a genre, they've been around for a long time in lots of different forms, but that was definitely the first one that I really got into. I remember hearing about it when the Nintendo DS was pretty new at the time, and I remember reading online that there's this, like, a lawyer game, like a game where you play as a lawyer? That just seems so crazy. And at the time, there were all these other kind of weird DS games where you would play as like a doctor.
Yeah, I remember Trauma Center and Ace Attorney would often be mentioned like in the same sentence, you know, because they're both very quirky kind of games that you take a profession that you don't normally take on in a video game.
Yeah, which I thought was really cool about the DS. There was a lot of innovation in a lot of the games they had. But, I mean, that was one of the big hooks for me, because I didn't know anything about the game. I just thought the idea of a lawyer game was kind of funny.
Yeah, it actually, I think that was a major part of its initial appeal, because it was such a strange, out there idea. And, you know, whenever you looked at the screenshots and read impressions of it, it wasn't just a lawyer game. It wasn't just like Law and Order, the game. It was this really sort of dynamic, crazy Japanese lawyer game, where they would say, objection, and take that, and like point their finger really crazily at the other guy, and the other guy would like recoil, and there'd be like damage noises and stuff, like you're actually in a fighting game or something. So I think that was a very smart decision on their choice, and it really kind of brought the appeal of the series to new heights, you know, to make it more than just a visual novel game. And that's how they sold it. But yeah, this series was actually started by a guy named Shu Takumi, who was working under Shinji Mikami, who I think is the creator of Resident Evil. On Capcom. And Mikami said, hey, Takumi, make a new type of game, you know, within a few months. And Takumi has always been interested in mystery games. So he initially made kind of this detective kind of prototype, like an idea of a detective game. But it evolved into a lawyer game once he decided he wanted to focus more on the contradictions and stuff like that in the courtroom. So, for those of you who haven't played these games, that's really the main appeal. You know, it's not just you're like doing these civil cases where, you know, I don't know, someone's suing the absentee father for not paying child support or something. You know, at its heart, it's a mystery game. It's murder mysteries. You're a detective in everything but name only. You know, like you're going through and trying to solve these cases. But instead of, you know, doing all the detective legwork, you're doing a lot of it in the courtroom, just interviewing people and pointing out contradictions using the items in your inventory.
Yeah, the gameplay is kind of split half and half. Like you have these investigation sequences where you go investigate the crime scene and interview people and try to, you know.
That's very detective-y.
Yeah, but on paper, there's the other section of the game is when you go to the courtroom and actually have to prove someone innocent or guilty. But there's a lot of detective work there too. Like unlike real life, where you can't have like random evidence just be presented during the trial. That's just, it would be considered inadmissible.
Yeah, like the prosecution is just sitting on evidence, waiting for the defense to get smug, you know, and feel like they won the case. And it's like, bam, you know, this photo proves otherwise.
Yeah, like there's a lot of things about the system in the game that wouldn't fly in real life, but it makes for really good gameplay. It's very exciting and very engaging. And you're always trying to, you know, you run through the evidence in your mind and what the people have said and trying to piece things together. And most of the time, it works out really well. Sometimes I think like it's expecting you to do something to make a certain connection that either you've already made or doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so if you're one step ahead of the game, or you know, and you're trying to present something that would still work, but the game is not what they want you to present yet. You can't connect those dots yet. That happens sometimes. It's a little frustrating. And there's always the moment where you're just completely stuck, and so you save and you just throw out thing after thing, and just keep resetting until you stumble upon something. That happens every now and then, maybe like once a game for me.
Yeah, something like that.
But for the most part, the contradictions will make sense. They don't actually require that much memorization, I've noticed, because the evidence itself will say this was found at this time. You don't actually have to remember all these details, which I think is good because, that it's meant to appeal to a broad audience. And I think they're still, nice and challenging for the most part without having you memorize every single little detail of these cases.
Right.
So the games center mainly on this character called Phoenix Wright. And he's got kind of this porcupine style haircut, but he's a good guy. He's invested in the truth, and he's kind of an everyman. He's not. It says ace attorney, but he's actually not in terms of lawyers. Like, he's not really like a prodigy or anything. He's kind of the underdog of the series. Like, he'll start off with his first case, and all the odds are stacked against him. And you realize soon, a lot of times you're just kind of bluffing to try to find something. That's kind of a staple of his character as well. But it makes him really relatable. It makes him really likable. And I think that's a big point of entry for the games is Phoenix himself, because it's kind of, you feel bad for him when you screw up and he's like rubbing his head. He's like, sorry, Your Honor, I have no idea what I'm doing, And on the flip side, the opponents are often people that have never lost, that are super serious, and you just kind of want to take them down a peg because they're kind of smarmy and aggravating.
At face value, the legal system in Phoenix Wright is kind of nonsensical and a little hard to believe. It's actually something of a parody of the Japanese court system, in that in Japanese society, there's like a 99% chance that someone who's accused will be convicted.
Wow.
The court system in Japan is very different than America. So from my perspective, playing the game initially, I was like, this court system doesn't make any sense, but there's more to it. There's if you read about the Japanese court system, there's a number of references and things that Phoenix Wright does to call into question the assumption that the prosecutor is going to win and the prosecutor's always right.
Yeah, that's kind of a recurring theme of the games is trust and belief in the goodness of people, even when all is stacked against them. And it's part of what makes Phoenix kind of this very endearing character, because he's very much devoted to trying to find the truth, even if sometimes the truth is ugly. So it's a game that's got a very whimsical sense about it, but it's also got a lot of heart. There are a lot of little moments, little sequences and stuff that can be sad, that can be emotional, that can be creepy, and of course there's a lot of humor as well. And he interacts with like the weirdest people you've ever seen. You got just the main cast. You've got Maya Fey, who looks like she popped out of feudal Japan and can like summon ghosts. You got Miles Edgeworth, who's dressed like a Victorian era Liberace. He's got the world's like pinkest, purplest jacket and this frilly cravat thing, and he's like the most serious character in the series. And there's the bratty Franziska von Karma, who brings a whip into court and hits people with it, including the judge.
Yeah.
And speaking of the judge, he's this doddering old man who goes off on endless tangents and is prone to be swayed by like sexy witnesses and intimidating prosecutors. So he's kind of amoral, but no one ever actually calls him out on it. So it's really an eclectic mix, and that's not even getting into like the ventriloquist or the clown or the psychotic character from the third game that keeps popping up even though the character is dead. How many more? There's the Cyclops prosecutor guy.
There's Gumshoe.
Oh, there's Gumshoe. Gumshoe's probably one of the more normal ones. He's just slightly incompetent detective. All around likable guy.
The cast of characters is really strong in all the games. I think that's probably what kept the series going. Past the basic concept, which was appealing and fun. If the player didn't like Phoenix so much, Phoenix and Maya and
the rest.
Yeah, and the rest. Yeah, if the characters didn't work right, if the characters weren't as likable as they are, then I don't think the series would have continued it to the success that it's had.
Yeah, and when you're talking about a visual novel, it's super important that you have a good story and a good set of characters. Ideally both, but for me, my favorite part is probably going to be the cast. The stories are generally well done. They're good mysteries. They have a lot of twists. This is a game that you don't want to spoil, because you find the killers in pretty much every case, and they're almost always going to be someone that it's a little bit surprised. You're not really sure they're the killer, and some of them it's these huge twists, and that's part of the appeal as well. Just trying to solve these mysteries with this kind of quirky set of characters, and I don't know. I feel like the Ace Attorney series really hits the right tone for me in terms of storytelling. It it hits the right balance of like drama and comedy, which is like, I don't know, maybe 30% drama, 70% comedy, but some of my favorite shows do as well. I think The Office kind of hovers around that area. Parks and Rec, King of the Hill. Simpsons probably a little more comedy based, but you get the idea. I like stuff with fair amount of quirkiness, but a little bit of heart to back it up as well. And that's what these games do.
Yeah, definitely. So the games themselves, there's actually a lot of them now.
Yeah.
It started on the Game Boy Advance, and then it was on the DS.
Yeah. The first three started off on the Game Boy Advance in Japan.
Right.
And then they brought all three over to America on the DS ports. So Phoenix Wright 1, 2, and 3 were on the DS. Then Ace Attorney 4 was also on the DS, but in both Japan and America. And then Ace Attorney 5 and 6 were on the 3DS. Now, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about Ace Attorney 4? Because it was a little bit of something different.
Yeah, the first 3 games had this similar cast of characters in all of them. You played as Phoenix, Maya was your sidekick, and you're generally against Edgeworth a lot of the time, but they mix it up. They mix it up with other prosecutors as well. They tried to turn the page. They tried to introduce a new cast of characters, and they tried to change up the overall storyline quite a bit. Mm-hmm. It started off in the future, considerably in the future from the previous games. Phoenix is no longer a defense attorney, and you're playing as Apollo Justice, who's a young, budding defense attorney, just like Phoenix was in the first game.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of similarities between how he and his partner Trucy, how they handle themselves in the court, how they interact, and how they go about solving cases, which on one hand I think was easy to get into it again because it felt very familiar, but it also felt a little too familiar. I think in some of the later games, when they try to change up these characters, I think they're afraid of people getting tired of the same characters over and over again, but the new characters are kind of similar to the old ones.
Yeah, so. I'll agree there. They do take the opportunity to throw a couple curveballs.
Yeah.
I think the killer in the first case of Apollo Justice wouldn't be able to. You couldn't really do that in the first 3 games, just because of the characters and their relationships.
Yeah.
But largely I agree with you about Apollo and Trucy's relationship and general interactions, feeling a lot like Phoenix and Maya, where you kind of have this rookie attorney that's kind of likable, everyman, and then his slightly younger sidekick who's kind of a little more quirky, a little more unusual. She makes kind of these non sequiturs sometimes. But yeah, that was Apollo Justice, and originally Phoenix Wright wasn't going to be in that until I think Capcom or something happened, and they're like, we gotta have Phoenix Wright somewhere in here. So then Phoenix Wright got put in, and it sort of overtook the game a little bit and kind of took the spotlight a little bit away from Apollo.
Yeah.
And moving forward to the 3DS games, Dual Destinies really brought back Phoenix in his kind of classic Ace Attorney role once again. So it was sort of a one-off experiment, but at the same time, it also created these new cast of characters that do show up in the later games as well. So, I think overall it was still kind of cool because it helped expand the universe a little bit more beyond, the rights and the phase and such. There was kind of this new set of characters.
You're right, but I felt that it set up a lot of things that were kind of ignored by the later games. I mean, to be fair, I haven't played all of Ace Attorney 5. I've only played the first case. But it seems like, not to spoil anything, but at the end of Ace Attorney 4, they had done a lot in terms of developing Phoenix's character and really breaking down the problems in the legal system and like proposing solutions for the future. And it didn't seem like that didn't go anywhere. That just kind of evaporated. And but it's Ace Attorney 5. They're like, Phoenix is just he's a lawyer again.
That plot thread that you're referring to, it does kind of. It is sort of pushed to the back. It died on its way to the home planet. Right,
and that disappointed me because I thought Ace Attorney 4 had a lot of good ideas, great characters, great cases. It was, and it was not afraid to be thinking about new things and trying to really expand what the world is. And I was disappointed that they didn't continue that thread, that they kind of fell back to a safer setting, as it were. And well, you tell me, since you've played Ace Attorney 5 and 6, did they try anything like that in the future? Do they go back to that in some way, or not?
You're referring to the Mason system, or the Juris thing,
or if not that, then anything that is along those lines. Like, do they really try to get into the legal systems flaws again?
They do. Yeah, they do that. But it's not really related to the events of Ace Attorney 4 so much.
Okay.
There are some callbacks with Ace Attorney 4 that, in particular in the 6th game, I think there's one case that feels like a big old sequel. That's actually a very good case.
Okay.
But for the most part, yeah, that plot thread sort of went the wayside a little bit. So, sorry guys.
Even though Apollo and Trucy started off feeling very similar to Phoenix and Maya, I felt that as they developed, they kind of came into their own a bit. The same could be said for Emma, who started off in case 5 of Ace Attorney, which I really enjoyed that case because the first 3 Ace Attorney games, as we mentioned, were Game Boy Advance games that were brought to the DS later, and they didn't really take advantage of the DS's capabilities. But Case 5 in Ace Attorney 1 was actually added for the DS, and it did take advantage of all the DS capabilities with the touchscreen and the microphone, and I really enjoyed that. And so by the time Ace Attorney 2 came around, I was kind of let down.
Just because it was made before 1.5 was.
Right.
Case 5.
So that's why Ace Attorney 2 felt a little lackluster to me, because it's like, there's no extra case, and it doesn't take advantage of the DS at all.
But that last case, oh man, that was good.
Oh yeah, you're right, it was
2-4.
Yep, 2-4 is good. So in case 5 of Ace Attorney 1, Emma felt pretty similar to Maya. She didn't really have a very distinct personality. She was excited and ambitious and cute, but by the time she comes back in Ace Attorney 4, she's really developed her own personality. And I wonder if you would say that the same thing happens with the Apollo Justice characters in the later games.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a good question. Actually, personally, I was not super into the Apollo Justice game. I like some of the cases on their own, but overall, I think the main thing about switching the characters and them still feeling too familiar, kind of bugged me. But I do think that Apollo and Trucy get better character development throughout 5 and 6. Apollo especially, actually. I really like where his character's gone. Trucy plays kind of a cameo role throughout most of 5, but she has a very good case in 6. I thought I made a top 30 Ace Attorney cases list, which is every case in the series, except for the DLC case of the most recent game, which I'm waiting to play a little bit later when I go on vacation. In the interest of not having this last forever, I'm gonna just say my top and bottom 5. But I will do the entire list a little later. So don't worry, there will not be spoilers right now. I'll keep it vague, So bottom 5, and I hate when people do top 10 lists and they start with their favorite and they work down to 10, because then it's like the list just gets less interesting as you go along. So we're going to start from least worst of my bottom 5 to most worst. So, number 5 of the bottom 5, 2-3, which is Turnabout Big Top. That's the infamous circus case with Mo the clown who goes ha 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 ha. And this is one of the least popular cases in the series. But I think it's got its good points. I like the killer, actually. I like the number 4. 4-3. So 4-3 is Turnabout Serenade. This is sorry, Chris. This is one of the Apollo Justice cases. This is the one where you're defending Machi Tobaye from using a gigantic gun that's
you didn't
to
like that one.
Dislocate arms. Yet he's a little kid and they think he shot it for some reason. But that's cool. It's cool. What else do you... Oh, okay. So this case has Lamaror, who I kind of like, but otherwise, I don't know. It just I like the sound mixing board part.
Yeah.
But I can't really think of other stuff I like all that much. Unfortunately, I'm not the biggest fan of Clavier Gavin.
Oh, I liked him.
I think he's fine. He's decent as like a prosecutor that's actually not out to get you, which is kind of nice. But unfortunately, he didn't really leave much of an impression on me. So this is actually a fairly unpopular case as well, actually, with the fan base. So I don't know. But I should have prefaced this by saying I actually like every Ace Attorney case to some degree, because I love this series. I think it's terrific. I think it's great. I think it's a big deal. I've made a lot of big deals. Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened there. I think I started spirit channeling or something. That was weird. All right, let's move on. 5-4 is actually my number 3. This case isn't bad, but this isn't really it's kind of a spoiler. It's not really a spoiler. Well, it's kind of a spoiler. I don't know. You could turn off your ears if you don't want to hear. The problem I have with this case is it doesn't feel like its own case. It feels like a preface to 5-5, and it feels like they arbitrarily split the case in two to have more numbers in the game, which is weird because Dual Destinies is actually very long if you include the DLC case. But as a standalone case, it leaves you hanging. It's like, well, that was not really a full story. It feels like day one of a trial that just happened. So that's why that's there. Number 2, second worst case, 5-2. Oh boy, Chris is about to play this one. This case is it gets points for introducing one of probably my favorite post trilogy main character, which is good. Otherwise, I just found it kind of dull. It's one of those things. Dual Destinies had a problem with very convoluted mysteries. For the killers, like too much stuff happens, and this is the first example of that in the game, where way too much stuff happened, and they show the killer at the beginning, which is like, why do that for a non-tutorial case? Why do that for any case, really? And it's not like not obvious who the killer is, but it's nice to have that doubt, you know, like this guy might be a red herring, this woman might be just cranky, you know. But no, they show the killer at the beginning of this case. It's way too long and kind of dull. And most of the original characters, you know, the one-time characters here, I didn't like that much. And my number 1 bottom case would be 2-1, Turnabout, the Forgotten Turnabout, I think it's called. Turnabout, the Forgotten Turnabout. And 2-1 is the one where Phoenix gets walloped on the head with a fire extinguisher and can't remember how to be a lawyer. So he needs Maggie Bird to help him. So he kind of stumbles through the thing. It's kind of another tutorial case after the first game. But let's face it, if you're starting the series with a second game, you should really be not doing that. You should be playing the first game first, going in order, you know? I liken these games to seasons of a TV show, you know?
Yeah,
like
that makes sense.
Each game is a season, each case is like an episode, you know? So you don't need to start with the second season. Unlike most TV shows, this game is strong from its first season. So, right, yeah, see? It's a metaphor, it works.
Yeah.
It's not like BoJack where you have to skip the first couple episodes. Oh wait, I didn't say why I didn't like 2-1. Well, Phoenix lost his memory and it was really obvious and not that exciting, but it was still alright. So anyway, go on.
You mentioned that it spoiled the killer at the beginning. Haven't some other cases done that as well?
They have, but they've all been case 1s.
Oh, okay.
In Dual Destinies, for some reason, they show the killer at the beginning of case 1 and case 2, which is weird. I don't really know why they need to. Usually, I don't like when they do that. I mean, I guess you could make an argument for like, oh, you see the guy and that's the guy, you know. But I don't know. You don't. I've never been a big fan. In fact, if you're playing case 2, I would recommend not watching the opening enemy cutscene, or turning down the volume and seeing if you enjoy it.
Okay, I might try that.
Okay, so my top 5 cases. I just ragged on a couple of Dual Destinies case, but my number 5 case of all time would actually be 5-6, which is the DLC case for Dual Destinies. It's really good. Phoenix is defending a killer whale in court, which is, right away, it's ridiculous, but suddenly it gets like the stakes get high, it gets really emotional, it has a bunch of characters, it's got surprises, and it's just really well done. It's actually my favorite case in the whole game.
Wow.
Yeah. Number 4, 6-5, which is the last case of the most recent game. This is a big old case with a big old twist. It's not necessarily about the killer, but it's about something else during the case. And it's actually a really good case for Apollo Justice, our old friend. It's got a good ending. It's got a buttload of characters. It just it feels appropriately dynamic and large. Number 3, 1-4. That's Turnabout Goodbyes, I think. This is the one where you're defending Edgeworth, which really makes Edgeworth as a character come into his own. And I think it's all around. It's a great case. It really sets the standard for cases like this, where like something happened in the past and something happened in the present, and Phoenix has got to solve both crimes. You know.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. It's got the crazy prosecutor Von Karma, who's just nuts. It feels like an impossible opponent. Number 2, 2-4, which is Turnabout. Turnabout. Farewell, My Turnabout, I think. This is the one where that kind of flips the whole series on its ear a little bit. But that's all I'm going to say about that, really. It's a great character study for Phoenix and for Edgeworth. this is the one that happened at the end of Justice for All, and I think it's one of the deepest cases in the series, and just a great story all around. And my number one choice for greatest Phoenix Wright case of all time, 3-5, Bridge to the Turnabout. This is a very popular case. It's kind of where everything comes to a head. It's got a lot of spirit channeling, so if you don't like that, I don't know what you're gonna think about this case. But for my money, I think they use spirit channeling usually in pretty smart ways when they have it tied into the case. It gets really dynamic. It gets really crazy, and the killer is just nuts, and the story, all the stuff that happens, it's all emotional, it's all happy, and I stayed up till like 3 a.m. playing it whenever I first played it. It was great, and this was like around the time Mario Galaxy came out, so it was good times. Good times being a Nintendo fan.
Yeah, with the ones I've played, I agree with your opinions on them. Let's talk about spirit channeling for a little bit, because that was something that turned me off of the series at first. In this game that's about using reason and logical deduction to solve mysteries, to have this like, we're gonna lose, and then spirit channeling happens and it introduces some new piece of evidence or something and changes how the case is gonna go, and that kind of that turns me off a little bit.
A little Deus Ex Machina for you, huh?
Yeah.
Deus Ex Machina.
And I know they could do that same thing without spirit channeling. Like, they could still have, we're going to lose the case, and then some random person comes in the courtroom and says, I have new evidence. Like, so you could still do the same sort of thing without spirit channeling. And in both cases,
it happens.
It's kind of annoying. But, because the satisfying thing of solving these mysteries is seeing all the pieces, putting them together gradually, and, getting that, making the player be the one to make those good connections and figure things out and be the one to go, oh yes, this is the answer, rather than having the answer just suddenly happen, which sometimes happens with the spirit channeling. And like I've more or less managed to swallow the spirit channeling as like, okay, it's just kind of part of this universe, but it always raises so much questions for me. Like, is no one else in this courtroom like fascinated by what's going on right now?
That's a good point. Now here's my defense of spirit channeling though. What you said is true about like Phoenix getting stuck, and then Mia's there and she's like, look, Phoenix, you gotta look in your heart. And it's like, okay, Mia's saving the day again. But that kind of tapers off after the first game, where Phoenix kind of comes into his own. So he doesn't really need, Mia's help anymore. But at the same time, like with spirit channeling, it's I don't really find it used as a solve all thing beyond maybe one or two instances early on.
Yeah,
it's
right.
just kind of part of the universe, and it's got its own rules, like the spirit channeler has to, the person channeling has to be dead. They have to, like, it's hard to do. They take on the form of that person. It doesn't just start pulling rules out of nowhere, which is a problem I had with, we haven't talked about this one yet, but Ace Attorney versus Professor Layton. I talked about it on another podcast, where the magical spells would just kind of pop up, and there could be spells you didn't know about that do this, and they don't really use spirit channeling as kind of a cheat like that. So
You're right.
The supernatural elements of the series, there's several of them. There's Apollo's bracelet. There's the Psyche locks with the Magatama. There's Athena's mood matrix, and there's a new element actually in the sixth game, which is kind of similar to spirit channeling, but they each have these established rules. So using those established rules, you can still point out logical holes in the testimony, still point out contradictions, and use them within the confines of the mystery, because the world rules have been established in that way. So I don't mind them as much. Plus, they do really dynamic stuff with it in 3.5. So I have a soft spot for that case. I'm always gonna feel like it might be a net gain.
I kind of agree, actually. When I played 3.5, that might have been the point at which I was like, you know what, I'm okay with the spirit channeling stuff, because it was done really well in that case, and I...
You're like starting to change your mind halfway through this.
I mean, it still doesn't totally sit well with me, because, I'm a very logically minded guy, and when something like that happens, it's hard for me to believe that all these other characters don't, like, flip out about this magic that's happening in front of them. Like, they don't, like, call these reporters and I don't know, scientists and stuff like, what is happening here? Like, this person can.
I think the game kind of explains that with, or like the question where it's like, why don't you just channel the victim and we ask them themselves, But I think the game kind of answers this with the backstory about, Misty Faye they're using I think the spirit channeling in a case, and something happened, like it completely discredited her. Remember, this was like the DL6 case. So spirit channeling became like this thing that people weren't really sure existed, or like had a really bad rap behind it. So there's a little bit of world building involved with spirit channeling, or it's not just completely like out of nowhere.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that now.
But I mean, I understand what you're saying. You just, you have to kind of accept these aren't, even though you're pointing out very realistic logical holes, they're not actually supposed to be the most realistic logical games, if that makes sense.
Right. So in addition to those games, there were also the Ace Attorney investigation games.
Yeah, there were 2 of those.
I have not played those. I know they have their fans and they have their detractors. What do you think about them?
We never got the second one. I got Ace Attorney Investigations. We got, the U.S. got it. I actually haven't finished it. I played through the first 4 cases and part of the 5th, but like it was one of those things where some other game comes out and you're like, oh, I'm gonna play this instead. It didn't really grab me the way the normal games do. I feel like just not having those courtroom battles kind of takes away something. Because to be honest, the courtroom stuff is the best part of Phoenix Wright. Sometimes the investigation scenes can kind of drag, and this was really all investigation scenes with some courtroom-esque like battle of wits, every now and then. But I didn't find the story as interesting. I didn't find the characters as compelling in general. They had their kind of cool spots, but here's the thing though. Like most Ace Attorney fans will put Ace Attorney Investigations pretty low on their rankings. But then they'll put Ace Attorney Investigations 2 like really high on their rankings, like best game of the series.
Oh.
Which I've never played, but I hear a lot of good things about. So I don't know what to believe, because it's a super popular game with the fan base. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. And in addition to those games, there's also Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, where you will have the puzzles done by Professor Layton and the courtroom scenes done by Professor Layton. Yeah, well, okay, so he plays Phoenix, but Layton's the guy that knows everything and shows up Phoenix all the time, so it left me kind of bitter as a Phoenix Wright fan. Also, that had a weird twist.
They should have just called it Ace Attorney Professor Layton.
They should have or Professor Layton versus Professor Layton. He can do it all. He can do everything. He can fight with a sword. He can do puzzles. He can do courtroom stuff. He's better at Phoenix at courtroom stuff.
Well, that game was developed by the developers of Professor Layton, right? Not Ace Attorney? Or did they work together?
It was a work together. It was done by Level 5 and Shu Takumi, the original creator of the series, in fact.
Oh. So he didn't mind that Layton was still in the spotlight?
I guess not. Kind of weird. Kind of weird. Yeah, so there's that. I wasn't a big fan of that. I mainly like the mainline games. The main 6 games I think are all worth playing.
But there's also the Japan-only Daiyakuten Saiban.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was this is also by Takumi. This was I think a 1800s not feudal Japan, but like 1800s Japan court system kind of game, where you run into like Sherlock Holmes and his Lolita little kid sidekick Watson, who's like an 8-year-old girl. I've seen Chris's face here on Skype, and he's kind of grimacing. Yeah, I don't know. I hear mixed things about this. It never came out over here, and it's getting a sequel, which will probably also never come out over here. So, I don't know.
Phoenix Wright also showed up in the fighting game that Capcom made, Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Was that it? Was that the one he was in?
Yeah.
That might have been it, yeah. He shows, yeah, he's, I kind of would like to see him in Smash myself, but he's a little more obscure. He's more obscure than like Mega Man and Ryu, of course.
Yep.
But this is a cool guy overall. And this series is near and dear to my heart because I met my wife through it. I met Sarah through Ace Attorney. We actually worked on a fan project together called the Turnabout Musical, which I wrote 10 songs for and was the voice of Phoenix. So I probably should have mentioned that earlier. That's kind of a major deal. Like my son wouldn't exist without this series. So yeah, go play Ace Attorney. It's a good time, even if you never played a visual novel. It's rated T for teen, so all you kiddies can't play it, but anyone else would love it probably.
I don't know. Anyone who's 10 or over, I'd say could play it.
It has blood.
Not much.
No, it's not
just
much
a little
blood.
bit.
I mean, you got 8-year-olds playing Call of Duty and throwing the N-word around. I mean, they can play Ace Attorney.
They can play Ace
Attorney. They could take a break, save some lives instead of devouring them or whatever you do in those games. I'm not sure. I think you throw bullets at people. I don't know.
Something like that.
So if you've played Call of Duty, leave a message for us and tell us how it is. Leave a comment on our YouTube.
So the series has done a few interesting things. The release of the Ace Attorney series has been kind of different for each game. Like the first game that came out, Ace Attorney, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, was only available online, I believe. You had to order it from...
yeah. That's true.
From like Nintendo's site.
Yeah, it was sort of like Electroplankton. You could only order the game online, and the next couple games were easier to find. And then 5 and 6 were digital... Excuse me. Wow, sorry. 5 and 6 were digital only for the U.S. audience, but I think physical everywhere else or in Japan. So yeah, they've had a variety of... It's still kind of a niche series, but it's by far the most well-known visual novel series, especially in America, I would say. Maybe not everywhere, but definitely in America.
Do you remember the game Hotel Dusk, Room 321 or whatever it was?
Yeah, I owned that for a little bit, but I couldn't really get into it.
No, it came out around the time of the Ace Attorney was catching on, and I got it because I was like, oh, it's like another Ace Attorney kind of game. Mm-hmm. It's like a murder mystery sort of thing.
Yeah, visual novel.
Yeah, I think it lacked the sort of exciting sequences that Phoenix Wright had, though. Like, Phoenix Wright has a lot of, the courtroom scenes and
got good music.
Yeah, good music. Hotel Dusk was more like sleep-inducing, I guess. It was a little more.
Yeah, that's true. The style of it was more. It was much more low key.
Yeah.
So,
have you played other visual novels that you liked?
We were talking about Zero Escape. Those were good, but
have you played the Danganronpa series?
I haven't. I think that's by the Zero Escape guy. But I think Ace Attorney and Zero Escape are the only ones I'm intimately familiar with.
Yeah, we had some fans that were asking if you played Danganronpa.
Yeah, sorry guys, but I haven't.
Not yet.
I have not. Not yet. All right, Chris. Well, since we talked about the scattered release across physical and digital media, I guess that takes us into our other main discussion topic: physical versus digital. Latent versus latent. All right, let's talk. Let's talk physical versus whatever. So let's cut to the chase, Mr. Hedworth. I know that you're making a case for digital media, and I'm going to make it for physical. Okay. So go ahead, present your evidence, so I may object and scream at you and such afterwards.
Well, basically, I think digital works better for 98% of games, basically. Like, for me, if I want to have a game on my shelf, it's because I want it to be like... It's because it's a game that I really feel strongly about. So, like a Zelda game or, I don't know, Mario Galaxy. It's just like for movies, like The Godfather is some, classic that I know I'm going to want to have for a long time. And people who come over, they want to look at... I want them to look at my shelf and go, oh, he has good taste in games. Or, but...
So far, we kind of agree. It's just that I really like all games.
Yeah, that would be the difference. When I play a game that, I don't know, doesn't really stand out to me or I don't think is very good, I don't really want it to stay on my shelf. And even games that are okay, like you buy them, you collect them, it's stuff that builds up over time, It can develop a lot of clutter. But those points are actually less important than what I'll get to now, which is that the actual distribution of games is friendlier to the developers digitally compared to physically. Because a physical distribution of games is actually kind of expensive. Not only do you have to produce the actual disc or the cartridge and the case, you have to ship it to the stores, in addition to having to actually negotiate with those stores and get, okay, how are we going to do this deal? What cut are you going to get? What cut are we going to get? And having those actual stores out there that distribute the games to the customers, you can cut all that out by doing digital.
Yep. I can speak from experience on that point.
Yeah, and the digital really enables, I think, a lot of independent developers to be more successful. It gives a bigger cut of the revenue to the developers themselves. And considering the increased internet speeds and storage space that's available nowadays, I think there's far few barriers to making it a success, like really the best way to do things in general. I don't even know. I don't even know if I would demand physical in the future. Like, say, on the NX, I don't know that I'd need physical. I feel like I'd like to have like a really nice case for Zelda Breath of the Wild, but I could live without it. I could live with just the digital, especially if the costs can come down as well. So Nintendo's profit from a $60 physical sale is probably less than a profit from a $40 digital sale. So I feel like they could pass some of that on to the consumer, and a lot of times you haven't really seen them do that for console games yet.
No.
You disagree. You disagree.
No. I agree that Nintendo doesn't do that.
Oh.
Oh, that no was just in response to everything you said. No. That's my counter argument. Wrong.
Well, tell me about physical games, Matthew. Why do you like them so much?
I will tell you about physical games. Number 1, seeing rows of boxes gives my sad life some meaning. Number 2, you can't use digital games as a coaster if the game is bad. Number 3, digital stuff is dumb. I know. I actually have a real list here. It's a list of 10 things. 10 salient points, and I think you'll agree they're quite salient. All right, number salient. That's a weird word.
That's a good word.
It sounds like saliva. Can you have salient saliva?
I don't think so.
All right, so here's salient point number 1: the satisfaction of ownership. I'm not exactly sure what else I was gonna say about that. I think let's move on. Wait, what?
I would say that's actually a good point.
Being able to hold something, in your hand, and feeling it. It's got a physical space.
Also from
like,
just a strictly legal perspective, the ownership of a digital game is kind of gray. It's kind of a gray area. Like,
that was actually one of my other points. The number 2 is the security of ownership. Yeah. So it sounded like you were going to make that point for me. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of these digital games, you're actually kind of renting the game. Essentially, you're basically
you have a license.
You're paying for a license for the right to play the game, and a lot of the time, if the company wanted to, they could just cut you out, and you can't play the game anymore, and you can't do anything about it. So that is a pretty
like the security,
sketchy.
Being able to just, if I have this game, I can play it whenever.
Yeah.
Number 3, physical games, they feel more real. They make me more likely to play them. If I open up a folder on a computer or a 3DS or whatever and see kind of all these icons, I don't know, it's sort of one of those intangibles, and honestly, it probably varies from person to person, but if I look at like my, collection of NES games or something, it just feels like this more, it's like it exists more. I don't know. It makes me more likely to want to be able to play them, like take a cartridge and pop it in the thing. Number 4 is the inherent value. You cannot resell digital games, really. I mean, after you open them, I guess you can sell codes. But if you have a physical game and you're done with it or you don't like it that much, you can go and sell it on eBay or whatever. And I've done this a few times. I actually don't sell games very often unless I'm just like, I don't think I'll ever play that again, or that doesn't really have some sort of emotional connection or whatever. And I might sell one or two. But that's kind of a point in the digital game's favor, especially when you consider Nintendo selling games at the same price. The digital games and physical games at the same price. Yeah. It's just like one of these has actual value and the other kind of doesn't.
Right.
Number 5, the box and the manual. The manuals aren't really around much anymore, unfortunately. But I do like that box, and I like that art. You get that art, and sometimes you get pre-order bonuses too, like digital art books and stuff. Do they do that for digital games? Because I haven't really seen. I mean, they might for other systems. I'm not super knowledgeable about.
Sometimes you can. Sometimes if you pre-order a digital game, they still might send you some sort of physical thing. That's often you have to pay more for it. So if you just pre-order the game itself, you wouldn't really get anything extra. But if you pay like an extra $20-$30 or something. They'll have like other pre-order bonuses, but I think that's a good point there.
You get kind of extra stuff. It's kind of nice to just be like, look at the art on the box and be like, oh look, I know that character. Maybe that's just me. Maybe the way I spend my Saturdays is different than how other people spend their Saturdays.
No, I was the same way, but I think that's kind of a lost era of game packaging because
the manuals are.
Yeah, the manuals are great. Like Super Nintendo, NES, even the N64 had a bunch of good ones, but. Yeah. By the time the N64 came around, you were definitely finding more
black and white little leaflets. Well, with the GameCube, I remember a lot of like EA manuals would be like It'd be like a folded piece of paper, with just a bunch of legal stuff inside.
But Skies of Arcadia had a great manual. You remember
Skies?
It had a great manual. It was thick. It had like lots of descriptions of characters and worlds and stuff.
Oh, and, yeah. I think I lost my Skies manual. That's really upsetting. It's upsetting.
It was probably the best manual on the GameCube, I think. The only thing that would make it better is if it was in color, because it was black and white.
Oh.
But it was still very good. Very good.
Sega and their black and white manuals.
Yeah.
I remember that was always a thing with them.
On the N64, I used to collect I saved all my boxes, and I would put them up on the shelf. And, I really liked that at the time. I guess I got rid of most of them. I kept ones that were like, the best games Zelda. That I would want to keep.
It's unfortunate that looking back, they had those cardboard boxes, because I actually have since they've switched to the jewel cases and stuff, I have all my games in those cases. It's a lot easier to stack those and keep them around without them collapsing and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really have too many cardboard boxes anymore. So number 6, this may vary from person to person depending on what you're looking for, but game room decor. If you have sort of a rec room, you can put some shelves up, display your games all in a cool way. People could come over and be all jealous or think you're a big nerd. It's just, I don't know, you said clutter, and I kind of understand that, because I'm at the point where I don't want so much like physical stuff either. But games, they take up so little space, and they kind of look all cool, all lined up, all whatever, that I don't know. I think this is you can make a nice looking game room with your collection all splayed out, and people are like, whoa, Chrono Trigger, awesome. Number 7, you can loan a physical game to a friend without having to loan them your entire system.
That's a good point.
Number 8, you don't need to worry about storage space. You don't need to worry about SD cards. You don't need to worry about external hard drives, where like my console is turning into a computer. It drives me crazy. Number 9, all your eggs are not in one basket. If I lose my 3DS, which has a bunch of virtual console games, I lose all those games and their save files. But I do have a pretty extensive 3DS physical game collection, which thankfully if I lose my 3DS, I don't actually lose that. So, or if I drop it in the toilet or whatever, if you have a lot of value on that system, it can really be a problem if it's stolen. Although I think Nintendo may have a some sort of re-download thing if you like call them up or something. So it may not actually be as bad as it sounds now I'm thinking about it.
Well, from what I've read, the way that Nintendo does it is pretty restrictive compared to something like Steam, where you have an account that you buy the game once and you can re-download it as many times as you want on multiple devices. Even if your computer turns into it blows up and you have to get a new one, your games are still protected. I think Nintendo would do well to adopt a system more like that, where especially because they're going to release a new console, and what are you going to do with all your old ones? Honestly, in my opinion, a game should be, if you buy it once on Nintendo, you should be able to play it on your 3DS if it supports it, on your Wii U, on your NX.
Yeah, you're talking about cross-platform play.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense, because
it's user-friendly. It'd be nice to have.
And they keep running into this thing where like, so all the virtual console games for the Wii weren't automatically on the Wii U. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's right. Except you can go to the Wii like channel of the virtual console of the Wii U and still be able to play them.
Okay, so it's like emulating the Wii version.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So there is that, but you can't like get a game on the Wii U and on the 3DS for free, with a couple exceptions. There's a couple third-party games that let you do that.
Oh, that's cool.
So my number 10 reason, and maybe the most important one, Huffington Post made a stop buying physical games article, and Huffington Post sucks butt. So those are my 10 reasons.
That site really pushes your buttons, doesn't it?
Oh man, Huffington Post. Oh man, I hate that place. Oh man,
a lot of these websites that like have top 10 reasons that the thing you like sucks.
That's right. They have that kind of voice too. It's like, look at this. This is so lame. It's like some gif of like a cat falling off. It's like nobody likes physical games. There's a cat falling off a couch. It's like picked from somewhere else. Yeah. So I that said, I have bought a couple games digitally that I could have physically. Only a couple, but I can see the appeal of having a game always on your system, no matter where you go, which is why I bought Smash Brothers 3DS digitally. So because I love Smash Brothers, and it'd be cool just to be able to have it accessible no matter where I go without having to worry about switching out the games or anything. And I think I got Mario Maker as well on the Wii U digitally, just because that seemed like another evergreen title where it's just like, oh, I feel like playing a Mario level. Let's turn it on, So from that perspective, I'm not saying physical is always preferable. I just in general I prefer it. I like having the physical copies everywhere, but I don't actually prefer it for movies, and that might just be because I'm a much more casual movie person. I'm content just watching movies, on Netflix or whatever. And so from that, and a lot of the arguments you were making, definitely apply to movies. In fact, in movies, I'm kind of the same way of like, I only need like my favorite movies in physical form. I
gotcha. Growing up, I had lots of relatives who would have like this whole wall of their house basically with all these movies and like VHS tapes, or or DVDs.
the Disney clamshell VHS.
Yeah.
Some of those are apparently kind of worth something now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Disney stuff is usually a pretty safe bet for going up in value.
Yeah. I think Nintendo's had a couple missteps with digital. So far their hardware has had relatively little storage space, so it fills up really quickly.
Yeah.
The first Wii U, did it come out with, was it 16 gigabytes?
It was 8, and it wasn't really the first Wii U. It was two versions of the Wii U, and one of them was like $50 cheaper.
Right, but like 8 gigabytes. You can't even download a single game on that.
You can't download some games on 8 gigabytes. Like Fatal Frame 4, I think, was kind of infamous for being like 15 gigs, I think, which is just not possible on the old.
Yeah, but even 64 on the current Wii U, I think is not enough. If they want digital to be a plausible, alternative for people if they want people to buy digital games, you need more space than that.
I got news for you. It's not 64.
It's not?
It's 32.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Everything was half as big as you thought it was. Yeah, they're pretty stingy with space. I've upgraded my my SD card a few times, so I can get a lot of virtual console games and stuff on my 3DS. But for the Wii U, I don't want to get the external thingy, So I just have to, I gotta rotate my games and such, which is kind of pesky.
Yeah, but the load times as well on the 3DS are pretty not great.
Once you get a lot of stuff.
I don't know, when I try to load Smash Brothers, it takes a good 20 seconds?
Well, that's
30 seconds.
That's more of that's a Smash Brothers thing.
Oh,
Smash Brothers is so system intensive that it's kind of infamous for taking a long time to load. Most games are pretty reasonable, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, viewers. I mean, I always say viewers. No, I say readers. I don't know. Listeners, I guess. Listeners, what do you think of the physical versus digital debate? Let us know in the comments below.
Please do.
Before we wrap things up, let's take a look at our comments from last time on our Super Mario 64 and Less is More podcast. That was podcast number 12. This guy says, "Excuse me, but I'd like to hear your voices in both ears." That was the A Poke. What's that about, Chris? What's the story there?
Yeah, I've been experimenting with different audio options and
Are we
effects.
not rocking his ear holes appropriately?
On that podcast, I had split our voices to the left and right. They were panned a little too much, I think. So I'm actually going to fix that on the audio version that you can get on iTunes or Android. And on future recordings, we're definitely going to have a more centrally mixed audio sources. So
okay, yeah, let us know if things still seem out of whack. We got another comment here from Panheim. He says, "I agree with what Chris says about minigames nowadays focusing on a more linear, streamlined experience. While this can be great, I do feel a lot of developers have forgotten how wonderful the essence of exploration can be. Mario being the case in point, with the controls continue to reach new levels of perfection. We've gone from 64 and Sunshine, with their fantastically charming overworlds, where you can play around when not in the mood to do levels, to a smaller yet enjoyable Rosalina spaceship, to a Planet Mario that felt super cramped, to literally no overworld at all." And then he talks about Paper Mario being a victim of this because it started off as an RPG and kind of has gone down a different road, which is interesting because we'll be talking about Paper Mario next time around.
Yep.
That's a sneak peek. Let's take a look at another comment here. This guy says, "This is Super Nerd 137. His first 3D Mario game was Sunshine. He really loved the open-endedness and sense of exploration in Mario 64. But the technical limitations are really impossible to ignore. I mostly found it to be a rather ugly looking game with a bad camera and too many invisible walls. However, it's still a blast to play and replay, mostly because of the intricate set of movement options that are sorely missed in the modern games. That's interesting. That's a comment from someone who did not play Mario 64 as his first 3D Mario game, so he kind of had a more modern viewpoint of it, saying that the visuals hadn't aged well, but the controls are still ahead of their time. This guy, David Borengasser, says water levels in 3D games are always terrifying. I always see that all of that space and think that it could be filled with sharks or something. He says that song better be available for download. Oh, he's talking about the Chris Head song. I guess we could put that in the link somewhere.
Yeah,
Big old fat pudgy head.
I feel the same way about water. It's terrifying because of the uncertainty of what is in the fog, because it's always like this fog, you know. So it's you can't really see through it all the way, and you don't know what's in there, and especially because of the camera. Like in the Dar Docks, there's that shark that swims around, and if you're swimming in one direction, he can suddenly come from the left or the right.
Yeah, you got those blind spots.
Yeah, it's the blind spots.
Tunnel vision.
Yep.
All right, we got one more. I'll do one more comment. This is Dorko for you. That name sounds familiar. I think I've read one of his comments before. He says, I think Super Mario 64 was the first Mario game I played, so I can never look at it and think that it's not Mario-like. Ha! It really is strangely different from the older games, but I appreciate that a lot. It's a boldness I feel Nintendo has been somewhat lacking lately, relying so much on formulas, and in the case of Star Fox Zero, trying to be like an older game and yet failing to recapture any of the charm or fun, in my opinion anyways. Sounds like you two should like go hang out and go bowling. Sounds like you guys got a kindred spirit here.
Right on, Dorko.
Yeah, he goes on to say, I do think there's more memorable locations and a sense of exploring with Mario 64 and Sunshine. Galaxy and Galaxy 2 have cool spectacles to them, which helps despite the linearity. Mario 3D Land doesn't? I can never fully explain why, but I really don't like Mario 3D Land despite enjoying all the other 3D Mario platformers. Mario 3D World was fun though, and I appreciated every unique level and gimmick. I feel like Mario 3D World is less memorable than big Mario games before it, but it was a very solid game. My only wish is that it had a stupid amount of characters. Ha! I would keep playing that game if characters like Wario were also available. Yeah, I can't really disagree with that second paragraph there.
Yeah, I don't know why they don't put more characters in it. I would think that'd be pretty easy to do.
It's pretty cool though, because it's the first Mario game since Mario 2 that had 4 different characters that each had their own attributes. Actually, they had 5 different characters. And it wasn't like Blue Toad, Yellow Toad, you know. You got Peach, you got Toad, you got Luigi and Mario, and you got the secret 5th character that I don't know if we're past the statute of limitations on spoilers for Mario 3D World, but you can just go look it up if you want. So, I think that kind of wraps up another edition of our podcast. Guys, stay tuned. We got some big plans for the future. We're considering expanding our repertoire, having more frequent updates.
Yeah, right now our plan is to be uploading something every Tuesday. So you can check back every Tuesday, and we should have something new for you to listen to. If you like our stuff, then we'd really appreciate it if you click the thumbs up button, or if you really like us, you can subscribe. That helps us kind of get an idea that we're doing the right stuff and that people like what we're doing, and it helps us figure out where we're going. So yeah, and leave comments too, because we really like reading your comments. Yeah.
So thanks for participating, guys. And yeah, like Chris said, we're going to be updating every Tuesday. Yeah, so there's your weekly update now. You can come back here every Tuesday or go to brawlinthefamily.com. You know, that site that's been around for a while. Yep. And we'll have new discussions and game talk and whatnot. So stay tuned. Exciting times.
And we look forward to seeing you there. I might have mentioned it before, but I'll just clarify. The podcast is now available on Android and iTunes. Oh, well, yes. So,
all right.
And that includes the BitF and other little things too. So if you just find us on there, we're Brawl in the Family Podcast. So our latest uploads will be beamed right to your mobile device.
Sweet.
Your telephone.
Folks. Your telephone. Your rotary phone.
Yep.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks again for joining us for yet another round of game discussion. We will see you next week, no less. Next Tuesday. So until then, have fun and play some Ace Attorney. I think you'll like it if you haven't tried it yet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good games.
All right, I'm Matthew Toronto.
And I'm Chris
Seward.
Yeah, I guess.
All right, until next time, smell your flip side. There we go.
Smell your flip side.
All right,
that's good.
Sounds good. Smell your flip side.